nation that forgets the discipline of inner values will be humbled by outer chaos. It is not a prophecy spoken in thunder, but a truth that unfolds with quiet certainty. Like a tree that withers when it forgets the nourishment of its roots, a nation that drifts from its moral center begins a slow decay, unnoticed by those who have learned to find comfort in distractions. Discipline is not merely about rules, it is a way of life. It is the awareness that every action, every thought carries weight, carries consequence. When people lose that awareness, they begin to walk blindfolded toward the edge of a cliff. They no longer feel the tremble of the earth beneath their steps. They no longer hear the voice within that once whispered right from wrong. And in that blindness, they begin to justify the unjustifiable, celebrate what should bring shame, and ignore what should inspire reflection. And in that blindness, they begin to justify the unjustifiable, celebrate what should bring shame, and ignore what should inspire reflection. India, your greatness was never meant to be measured by skyscrapers, satellites, or stock markets. Your greatness came from sages who sat under trees, kings who bowed before truth, and mothers who taught their children the value of silence and prayer. But what happens when silence is replaced by shouting, when truth is traded for convenience, and when prayer becomes just another performance? The soul of a nation begins to fade. The discipline that held it upright begins to crack, and the world outside starts to mirror the chaos within. Discipline is not given, it is cultivated. It begins with one breath, one moment of stillness, one choice to act not out of anger, but out of wisdom. But in a society that no longer honors stillness, every storm becomes louder. People chase pleasure but lose peace. They chase control but lose connection. And the sorrow and the sickness. The leaders lead not with vision but with volume. And the people follow not with trust but with fear or apathy. This is how outer chaos is born. Not from enemies, not from fate, but from the slow erosion of inner discipline. There was a time when the rhythm of life moved with nature, when people rose with the sun and rested with the stars, when food was sacred, not consumed in haste, when words were chosen carefully, because they were understood to carry power. But now the rhythm is broken. Days blur into nights, and nights are filled with noise. The mind is restless and the heart is burdened. And no matter how many technologies rise, no matter how fast the machines run, the soul feels more distant than ever. Without discipline, the mind becomes a battlefield. Every desire becomes a master. And when millions are ruled by undisciplined thoughts, a nation becomes a storm, pulled in every direction. The minds are ruled by undisciplined thoughts. A nation becomes a storm, pulled in every direction. The minds are ruled by undisciplined thoughts. A nation becomes a storm. It becomes reactive, unstable, uncertain, and the smallest spark can set the entire structure on fire. This is not a metaphor. This is the pattern of history. Kingdoms have fallen not because they were weak in arms, but because they were weak in values. And values are upheld only by discipline. The discipline to say no when temptation knocks, to remain calm when provoked, to serve rather than dominate. To India's wisdom traditions taught the way of balance, Dharma, not as religion but as the alignment with universal truth. But where is Dharma when injustice is normalized, when truth is mocked, when those who seek peace are silenced, and those who sow hatred are applauded. Discipline is not about perfection. It is about effort. Daily effort. Quiet effort. But when effort is abandoned, decay begins. And no system, no matter how ancient, how sacred, can survive decay unless it is restored from within. Look around. The signs are everywhere. The rising heat, the poisoned rivers, the disappearing forests, the unrest in the streets, the emptiness in the eyes of the young. These are not isolated problems. They are reflections. Outer chaos is a mirror held up to show the state of the inner world. A disciplined people do not exploit the earth because they understand interconnection. There is a mirror held up to show the state of the inner world. A disciplined people do not exploit the earth because they understand interconnection. There is a mirror. Explanation is a mirror held up to show the state of the inner world. A disciplined people do not exploit the earth. A disciplined leader does not lie because he knows the weight of words. A disciplined youth does not rebel in violence, but seeks to change with clarity. But when that inner foundation is lost, chaos becomes the teacher, and chaos is a hard teacher. When floods come, they do not choose whose home to enter. When fire burns, it does not pause to ask who is innocent. The laws of nature are clear and without prejudice. Likewise, the divine does not punish, it simply reflects. When a people abandon their responsibility to live in alignment, the natural consequence is correction, not as revenge, but as rebalancing. And that correction begins with the shattering of false security. The things once trusted begin to fail. Institutions collapse. Relationships fracture. The illusion of control crumbles, and what remains is raw, unfiltered reality. The day unfolds. This is a gift disguised as suffering, because in suffering, awareness can be reborn. In the silence that follows destruction, truth can be heard again. But why wait for the fire to consume? Why wait for the final storm when the signs have already arrived? The discipline of a nation is the sum of the discipline of its people. If each individual takes responsibility for one thought, one breath, one act of kindness, the nation begins to heal. But if each person waits for another to change, then the collapse accelerates. Discipline begins not with systems, but with self. Rise in the morning with intention, speak with integrity, eat with gratitude, walk with awareness, listen with humility. These are not small acts. They are the foundation stones of national strength. A disciplined people do not fear correction because they are already in tune with higher order. But a people that has fallen into chaos will experience correction as catastrophe. Not because the divine is cruel, but because they have drifted too far from the path. India is being given a choice, not through speeches or slogans, but through the unfolding of consequences. Every act has a ripple. Every decision plants a seed. The question is, what will you water? Fear or faith? Division or unity, distraction or discipline. Do not wait for another era to begin. Do not wait for another Mahatma, another saint, another reformer. The time is now. And the one who must act is you, because the fate of a nation is not decided in palaces or courts. It is decided in how the common person lives each day. Discipline is not a burden. It is a path to freedom. And it is that freedom rooted in values that keeps chaos at bay. A nation that forgets this truth will be humbled. But a nation that remembers, even in its final hour, can rise again. Not through noise, but through stillness, not through pride, but through practice, and not through power, but through presence. Let that remembrance begin now. When a people no longer hear the whispers of conscience, the voice of divine judgment begins to roar. In the beginning, every warning comes gently, like a leaf falling to the ground, like a breeze shifting direction, like the change in tone of a morning bird's call, subtle, soft, barely noticeable. But for those who live in noise, whose hearts have grown hard and ears grown deaf, the whisper is ignored. And what is ignored does not disappear, it transforms. From whisper to wind, from wind to wave, from wave to a flood that breaks through all that was once thought indestructible. The conscience is not just a private voice within, it is the thread that holds a society together. It tells a leader when to stop. It tells a citizen when to stand. It tells a community when it has strayed from the path. And when that thread is cut, the whole fabric begins to tear, first silently, then with the sound of thunder. Conscience does not shout, it does not argue, it waits. It waits for a moment of silence, for a breath, for a return to awareness. But in a land where silence is feared and reflection is avoided, conscience is buried beneath entertainment, distraction, and pride. And what replaces it is ego. And ego is loud. Ego declares itself always right. Ego demands control, attention, praise. But ego cannot build a nation. It only builds masks. And when a nation is built on masks, one tremor is enough to reveal the emptiness underneath. The voice of divine judgment is not like the voice of man. It does not come to destroy for the sake of destruction. It comes to restore what has been lost. But restoration often requires breaking. Just as a tree must shed its dead branches to grow again, a society must face the consequence of its forgetting to truly remember what matters. And so, when the whispers of conscience are silenced by convenience, by fear, or by greed, the divine sends clearer messages. A drought that lingers, a leader who leads astray, a division that refuses to heal. These are not punishments. They are mirrors. Not out of hatred, but out of mercy. Because the divine does not desire the fall of a people. It desires their awakening. But awakening never comes through comfort. It comes when the illusions we have worshipped begin to break. When we see that wealth without wisdom is a trap. That power without compassion is poison. That freedom without responsibility leads not to progress, but to collapse. India has known the sacred. Its rivers are named after gods. Its temples touch the sky. Its songs have carried the longing of the soul for centuries. But now the sacred is becoming a slogan, and slogans have no weight when they are not lived. The whisper of conscience says, respect all life. The roar of judgment answers when that life is exploited. The whisper says, treat strangers as family. The roar begins when strangers become enemies. The whisper says, speak truth even when it costs you. The roar comes when truth is silenced and the silence itself becomes unbearable. The divine judgment is not a foreign force. It is the natural outcome of imbalance. When a scale is tipped too far, gravity acts. When a mind is filled with lies, madness grows. When a nation chooses pride over humility, division over unity, and convenience over character, it invites a correction. And that correction does not ask permission. It arrives, it interrupts, it unsettles everything that was taken for granted. But within this roaring is an opportunity. The louder the judgment, the more urgent the call to return. Not return to a political ideology or a cultural identity, but to the simple, unchanging truth that conscience has always spoken. Be kind, be honest, be disciplined. Do not harm. Seek wisdom, not fame. Serve others, not just yourself. These truths are not old, they are eternal. And they have always been the foundation of every great civilization. Their abandonment always marks the beginning of collapse. You can see it now. The rising anger between neighbors, the mistrust between people of different faiths, the growing distance between the rich and the poor. These are not just social issues. They are symptoms. Symptoms of a people who have stopped listening to the voice within. When that voice is lost, every action becomes reaction. Every disagreement becomes a war. Every problem becomes someone else's fault. And soon the nation loses its soul, even if its body still moves. But it is not too late. The whisper still exists. Beneath the noise, beneath the pride, beneath the politics, it is still there. It is waiting. It calls not for perfection, but for return. Return to stillness, return to truth, return to humility. This return will not be easy. It will cost many things, comfort, false beliefs, perhaps even reputation. But what it gives is far greater. Peace, clarity, strength, and the protection that only comes from alignment with what is right. The roar of judgment is not forever. It lasts only as long as it takes for awakening to begin. But if awakening is resisted, if the call is mocked, if the signs are ignored, then the roar grows louder. The storms become more violent. And what was once gentle becomes a force that no wall, no government, no army can stop. This is not a threat. It is a truth seen across centuries. The fall of empires, the exile of kings, the rise and ruin of civilizations. All followed the same pattern. A turning away from conscience, followed by the rise of chaos. In India, you are not beyond hope, but hope without action is illusion. The time for speeches is over. The time for self-examination has come. Not just by leaders, but by everyone. A nation is not saved by policies alone, but by people who choose to walk the higher path, who choose to forgive instead of hate, to build instead of destroy, to listen instead of shout. Each person who does this strengthens the nation's soul. Each one who doesn't weakens it. The divine watches not with anger, but with patience. But patience is not without end. When the warnings become too many and the whispers too long ignored, then comes the roar. And by then, the choice is no longer yours. Do not wait for that moment. Choose now, listen now, change now, because what is coming is not in your control. But how you meet it, that is. The whisper is still here. Will you hear it before the roar returns?